All right, it looks like we've got folks joining. I can see the participants starting to come in. Good morning, everyone. I just sent the link again because it seems like there was an issue. All right. So let's take a look. There is a chat box. I'm not going to be able to read the chat box as we're going through the presentation, but I will be using the Q&A. So if you do have a question and you put it into the Q&A, I'll be able to go through those. And if there's anything that comes up that we don't have a chance to address today, I will follow up with those questions via email, or we can set up a time to talk. All right, it's 9:07. Let's go ahead and dig in. I'm Shannon Decker. I am a master trainer for a program called Hope Squad. We're going to talk a lot about it, but I have an organization called the Speedy Foundation. It's an Idaho-based nonprofit. Our mission is suicide prevention and mental health awareness. We were founded in 2011 in memory of my cousin, Jarrett Speedy Peterson. He was an Olympic freestyle skier. He had 3 Olympic trips. He came home from the Vancouver Olympics with the silver medal. And unfortunately, he passed away by suicide about 1.5 years later. And I was a teacher at the time, and I was getting my master's in school administration. And it was really devastating, as it is when you learn more about postvention for folks who really don't have the background and the understanding. And so we did a lot of work initially with the Speedy Foundation to launch Idaho's suicide prevention hotline. And then we started getting into education. Our nonprofit has always had a hold in Park City, Utah, which is where Speedy lived. And that is where I learned of the Hope Squad program. We had a booth set up at Deer Valley, as we do every year. We are handing out swag, having people program the suicide prevention lifeline number into their phone. And we had these people who were coming up, and they saw some of our swag that said Hope, and they said, "Oh, my grandson is on the Hope Squad. He loves it." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And then we had some kids come by, and they were, "Oh, we have Hope Squad at our school. We love it." And it really made me question what's going on here. And I found this program called Hope Squad that was based in Provo, Utah, and it's been a really incredible find. So to get started, we are going to take a look at some of these models. If you are in a school or in a school district or working with teachers, you might be familiar with some of these models. This is Cassell's social emotional learning standards. There's curriculum, there's school-wide practices and policies, and really the emphasis is building really competent, social, emotional, capable human beings, and integrating that into regular curriculum. Another piece that might be involved in your school district is the MTSS system. I pulled this one out of it was this graph was created by Kaiser Permanente Health, which supports a lot of multi-tiered response in the state of Washington. And then this one is from Boston Public Schools. But if we think about this the same way we think about response intervention in math and language arts, we've got our universal precautions. We give our curriculum with fidelity. Then we've got some targeted intervention that we kind of identify through progress monitoring. And then we track it through progress monitoring. Then we might have some really extreme tier 3 interventions. We might have a need for special education or outside consultation. And the same is true when it comes to mental health or mental wellness. And so school districts have come up with models to mirror what we're doing academically. I'm going to give you guys a quick poll. I would like for you to tell me what your role is, or what your interest in Hope Squad curriculum might be. We'll give this just a second. And I do have a couple of videos throughout today's hour-long coffee presentation, and I hope you guys brought a tea or a coffee or something to just kick back and relax for a little bit. Sometimes we wear multiple hats, and I think I set it up so that you can select multiple hats, but this looks good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So looking here, we've got some school counselors, we've got advocates, community members. This is awesome. Okay, so we're going to take a look here. This came through NBC last year. Right here, you can see Dr. Greg Hutnell, the founder of Hope Squad. He was a school principal. He'll tell his story. Here we go.
In high schools across the country, a crisis.
Who here knows somebody personally who's contemplated suicide? Wow. Every single one of you.
Suicide now the second leading cause of death between the ages of 10 and 18. For Utah principal Dr. Greg Hudnall, it's more than statistics after he was called to identify the body of one of his 14-year-old students.
I literally threw up and sobbed. I made a vow that I would do everything that I could to help prevent suicide.
He founded Hope Squad, a way to help kids change how they talk about mental illness.
Those young people feel like they're the only one, that they're embarrassed, they're struggling.
The program gives students the tools to recognize those in need and get them help.
I don't think that most people understand that people do say that they're going to commit suicide most of the time before they do.
There are now more than 500 squads across 18 states and Canada. Another 100 will begin next year.
We're having this connection now, we're having this relationship now, and I care about you.
Students are chosen by their peers and specially trained, meeting regularly. This is Hope Squad's first year in Mason, Ohio, and the first year without a suicide since Abby Gadio started at the school 4 years ago.
Do you think Hope Squad has saved lives this year? For sure. I think that because of Hope Squad, we get to those students early enough.
That stigma is breaking down. Students are willing to accept help.
Fifth grader Valerie Golvar recently spoke up when she saw a friend was cutting herself.
She told me about it and said, "Don't tell anyone." And my immediate reaction was to go straight to a Hope Squad advisor or an adult.
A move that may have made all the difference for that student and her peers.
The best part about Hope Squad is just knowing that you're able to help
and hope at a time they need it most. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News, Mason, Ohio.
Hey, NBC News fan.
All right. So before we go too much further, I'm going to give one more poll. I've only created 2. And I just want to know what your familiarity is with Hope Squad curriculum as well as with QPR curriculum. Okay, a couple people have had some QPR. That's great. Okay, this is helpful. Thank you. Looking at the results, it looks like we've got quite a few we've got 2 people who have taken QPR. So we will make sure to cover that because Hope Squad is based on QPR. It is the second leading cause of death for youth in the United States. It is the first leading cause of death for youth in Utah and Nevada. Once states like Idaho, Montana, Wyoming really dig into the National Violent Death Reporting System, once that system is stood up, which is only about a year in, and it takes about 2 years to get all that data, I think we're going to see that in rural states like that, it's also the #1 leading cause of death. That's my personal opinion. That's not a fact, but it is a fact in Utah and Nevada. This is an overview of really how this is not a school issue. This is a community issue.
Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among youth between ages 10 to 19 years old.
So this is old.
4,600 youth are lost to suicide each year. However, most suicides are preventable. Youth who are contemplating suicide frequently give warning signs of their distress. 7 out of 10 will tell a friend or give a warning sign that they are struggling, but many of their friends do not tell an adult. A Hope Squad is a group of students nominated by their peers as good listeners and caring fellow students. They work closely with the local mental health agency. Hope Squad students are taught by the school counselor and advisors on how to recognize suicide warning signs in their peers and provide support. Hope Squad members are trained on how to talk to a fellow struggling student. If the peer needs help, they listen and then try to convince them to go see an adult in the school. If that does not work, they inform a school counselor about their concerns about their peers, so the advisors can contact the student and the parents for additional help and support. Hope Squad members also bring suicide prevention awareness to the entire school by holding an annual Hope Week, where fellow peers are given information about suicide prevention. For more information, please visit www.
All right, so that's just kind of a quick overview. And again, it's a little bit outdated. We know that it's not a school problem. It really is a community issue, and it requires the whole community to respond.
We are living in a time when suicide is a chronic and an escalating concern. Recent studies have revealed that not only has suicide become one of the leading causes of injury death in America, but also one of the leading causes of death for people between the ages of 15 and 49, surpassing even cancer. Can most suicides be prevented? The answer is yes. Individuals who are contemplating suicide frequently give warning signs of their distress. Circles for Hope uses a comprehensive, holistic, and grassroots approach to community suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. An African proverb says, "It takes an entire village to raise a child." Hope for Utah believes it takes an entire community to save one. Circles for Hope builds community connections by training adults to take an active role in suicide prevention. Community trainings are provided to understand warning signs and who is at risk, how to intervene, and where to go for help. Circles for Hope also creates essential partnerships with the local mental health agency, as irreplaceable resources are provided throughout the community. They are a critical part of a community crisis team, as people from all agencies work together and share information for the public good. Circles for Hope offers school programs and training for staff in suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. Successful suicide prevention begins with education, and prevention is where the greatest energy should be focused. The goal is to train all school personnel to recognize warning signs, identify someone who needs help, where to access the help, and when to notify family. The schools also implement a peer-to-peer Hope Squad program, where students are nominated to become trained in suicide prevention. The impact of suicide is far-reaching and affects entire communities. When communities, mental health organizations, and schools work together to prevent suicide, the entire community is strengthened. Working together, there's hope that suicide can be prevented. More information on suicide prevention.
All right. So those are some of the basics. And another hat that I'm wearing that I didn't describe at the beginning is that I'm now the Tahoe Truckee Suicide Prevention Coordinator. And so I'm housed under Sierra Community House. I'm here based in Truckee, and I still travel when we're not under COVID lockdown back to Idaho and Utah to continue offering mental health first aid trainings, QPR trainings, you know, the plethora of trainings that the Speedy Foundation offers. As we are looking at this, we've got some folks on here who are in the Tahoe area and some folks who are back in Idaho, and we're talking about a couple different ways of setting this up. Again, we're not looking at this as a school taking on a curriculum and plugging it into their health. This is a peer-to-peer based program. So if we're thinking about the MTSS response, this would be a tier 2. It's not something that everyone gets. Students are nominated, and we'll talk about that process a little bit later. But they're able then to become empowered, and then they can become the eyes and the ears of the school. They can come out and they can start to train. You can have high schoolers that rotate through and teach lessons in health classes, or that might visit a middle school or an elementary school. I visited a elementary school in the Orem area of Utah where the 4th and 5th graders would go through the Hope Squad program. They were nominated. They attend the group. Sometimes it's a class, sometimes it's a club. They attended the group, and then they would take the literature in the elementary program. It's a lot of social emotional literature, and then they would go read that to the younger students, and they would be able to start those conversations, because students respond to students in a very different way than they do to adults. So as we're looking at this, I know that Tahoe is sort of looking at creating a cohort for support and training and some reduced costs. And there's a lot of schools in Idaho who are biting at the bit to get these programs started. So here is the curriculum. Let's take a look at exactly what it is. This is an example from the high school. We'll take a look in just a couple minutes on how it is scoped and sequenced, but each year there'll be a manual for the advisors. There will be student workbooks that go along with the content. And sometimes we have curriculum that has units or modules. Hope Squad has phases. And so here's the basics. QPR being the first phase that most of the curriculums go through. And it's something that's recycled throughout each year. It really is the basis of Hope Squad. And that's why Hope Squad is considered an evidence-based program, because QPR is an evidence-based program. It is in NREP. It's now defunct, but that was how the United States government, how SAMHSA recognized quality programs. The consideration for the Lake Tahoe area is Know the Signs. So Know the Signs is California's suicide prevention awareness campaign. And so if we know the signs, we find the words and we reach out. That's very similar to questioning someone, persuading them that there's hope and help available, and referring them to professional help. So that would be a conversation that we would have specifically about that. Let's take a look.
Research shows that the odds of surviving a heart attack in a public place are 10 times greater in regions where thousands of ordinary citizens are trained in CPR. It's called bystander rescue. When someone shows signs of experiencing cardiac arrest, the response of nearby friends, family, or coworkers is critical. The effective use of CPR doubles or triples one's chances of surviving a heart attack. Like CPR, QPR is an emergency intervention for someone experiencing a life-threatening crisis. QPR is easy to learn and easy to remember, but it takes courage to overcome our fears about reaching out to help someone who may be considering suicide. Research also shows that where QPR is widely taught, suicide attempts and deaths decrease. Just like CPR, QPR requires quick, bold, and informed action. Because suicide, like heart attacks, remains a rare event, we must train hundreds to save one, thousands to save hundreds, and millions to save thousands. There is an old Welsh saying, "No great misery goes unspoken." When we have a toothache, we tell people. We don't hide our pain. But because of the stigma and taboo around the word suicide, many people considering suicide don't speak plainly about their suffering. They fear our rejection. They fear that if they say something, we will ridicule them or make fun of them. As a result, people thinking about suicide often use indirect language. They hint at what they're thinking of doing. They send us coded messages, and they suffer in silence. Called suicide warning signs, QPR training teaches you how to recognize these warning signs, quickly decode them, and then question the person in an informed and compassionate manner to learn if they are considering suicide. Just as talking about physical pain helps diminish it, talking about suicide with someone willing and able to listen reduces psychological pain almost immediately. Trained QPR gatekeepers are merchants of hope, and hope helps prevent suicide. Millions of people have now been trained in QPR. Rigorous independent research studies support QPR as effective, and thousands of personal stories assure us that QPR is saving lives. When you use QPR, not everyone will be suicidal. Some people are simply stressed to the breaking point, but they still need help. Help you can give. Please note that you cannot put the idea of suicide into someone's mind. People are either thinking about suicide or they're not. The fear of putting the idea of suicide into someone's head is a myth that keeps us from acting when we should do just the opposite. QPR is a universal intervention for people in pain, whether they're thinking about suicide or not. While it takes a special courage to overcome our fears, we will teach you how to ask about suicide and to offer hope through listening. Listening is the power tool that restores hope in the hopeless. We know you can do this, and we will show you how. Preventing suicide. It's what people do.
And so thinking about that, it is embedded in all of the Hope Squad curriculum. QPR is safe to give to groups of students all the way down to age 12. After that, you would want to talk about QPR individually instead of in a small group setting. And no matter what we do, we try to keep QPR into smaller groups. Last year, we provided QPR to the new students out at Idaho's new medical school, and they wanted to do it in a great big lecture hall. And so there's a lot of considerations that go into that. And then some small group breakout and having lots of QPR instructors available. So this isn't something that you give, school-wide. It's a small group setting. And again, California has Know the Signs. I know that Nevada uses Signs of Suicide curriculum. And so that would be, a tier 1. Everyone gets that at a certain point in their grade level. And QPR would go right on top of that. So looking at the curriculum, every phase comes with their objectives. We've got some pre-reading for the advisor. And when we are thinking about Hope Squads, we want to have 2 to 3 people that act as advisors. They don't have to be the school counselor. And oftentimes we have small schools that don't have school counselors, or they're sharing school counselors. I've worked with the Catholic Diocese on their programs. They're using Signs of Suicide as well, and they don't have school counselors to go around. So we really want to get creative in thinking about our advisors here. It might be a parent who volunteers from the school community, who is just kind of the go-to parent. Everybody goes to them with their issues, and they help suss those out. Maybe it's a bus driver or it's a custodian. And I know that one of the, if we were to create a T-chart of pros and cons, one of the cons is time and funding this. And so each school is a different situation, whether you have funding to stipend or whether it's a volunteer position. Sometimes people have been touched by this and they have a calling, and it's their way of giving back. QPR we just went through, that is the basis of what all of this work is done. There's always a presentation, there's an activity, there's a lifesaver challenge, and then there's the references for where this comes from. There's a lot of members of the Hope Squad board who reviews the curriculum, who are researchers, who are studying suicide at the University of Utah, at BYU, and the likes. All right, and this is just kind of an example of what that might look like. All right, so a phase. So all the phases are created in Prezis. The Prezi is very interactive, but for the purpose of my PowerPoint, I use the PowerPoint version. So the PowerPoint version is just screenshots of the Prezi, and kids really do engage really well with the Prezi. So those are all built. I think one of the biggest issues we find with trying to stand up social emotional learning standards is that many states haven't adopted them. And if they're not adopted, then there's no funding for them. And then content, where are you coming up with your content? Where is the curriculum for social emotional learning? Sometimes we have it. Sometimes, maybe the school counselor is able to provide it. Sometimes your school district has adopted something, which is incredible. What I found as an educator and going out into schools to provide mental health first aid training, what I was hearing was that, yes, it's important, but it's a huge time constraint because we have to recreate the wheel. We have to create all this. So the Prezis are done. The lesson plans are done. You can add, you can supplement, but we're going to go through how to help a friend. So this is a high school lesson. Here's our big Prezi overview, if you guys have ever seen one of those presentations. Here are our objectives. We're going to understand the importance of breaking the code of silence. We're going to understand the importance of refusing to keep deadly secrets. We're going to know the questions to ask someone who may be depressed or suicidal, and we want to understand how to communicate with someone who may be suicidal. There's always a video that accompanies each phase.
Earlier this summer, I got a letter being nominated for Hope Squad, and this was a big honor for me. But unfortunately, I looked at my schedule and it was all filled up, and I was like, well, I guess it's too bad. I guess I just won't do it. And then later, just before school was going to start, I was texting a friend, and she started telling me these things that she was suicidal. And, I got pretty scared. I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. I was just getting pretty nervous. And I was like, I don't know who to turn to, what to do. Luckily, later, someone was able to help her out. But what I most regret was being able to not know what to do and help her. So I decided to clear up my schedule and be able to get Hope Squad in, because I wanted to know how to be able to help people and how to be a peer advocate. So I took the class, and it has helped so much. I've been able to reach out to people more, be able to see these things in people, and be able to become friends with more people, and just reach out to those I don't even know. And then later in the school year, knowing all these things, another situation came up where someone was suicidal. And this time, luckily, I was able to help them. And nothing feels better than being able to save a life and being able to know that I was able to help and be an advocate for them.
All right. So, talking openly about suicide can make a difference. And one of the questions that just came in, I'm going to answer it live. I recognize the myth about talking about suicide increasing suicide. However, if we know suicide is contagious in communities, wouldn't talking about suicide increase the attention related to suicidal ideation? Great question. So my answer is this. The Nevada Suicide Prevention Coalition, statewide, had a conference last fall, and the keynote speaker was David Covington. And David talked about contagion. And I actually found a recording of this talk that he did 2 years previous at the American Association of Suicidology conference, because we have had a couple suicides here in the Lake Tahoe area very recently. And as we know, with the pandemic, we are going to see an increase in suicide rates once we start coming out of the the physical isolation that we're currently experiencing. We can predict that. We don't know it, but it's statistically, it looks like that is the case. There's a lot of prevention that can be done. Anyhow, David Covington gives a keynote. He gave it in Las Vegas this fall, and it's profound. It talks about how the contagious part of suicide isn't like COVID-19, where it would be through air particles. The contagious part about suicide is that it builds courage. If you see someone who has taken their life and you relate to them in any way, if you are the same age, if you're the same gender, if you're in the same area, if you are in the same sport, it builds this courage. So if you have a wall that's up, and that's between life and death, it's very hard to cross that wall. And so the contagious part about suicide is that you're building this courage. But the other thing about courage is that the hopeful piece is contagious. If we supplement as much in the talking about it, addressing it, not ignoring it, and responding to it with hope, that's what counteracts it. We always want to end anything that we're doing on a hopeful note. An example from our background with the Speedy Foundation, and just as a side note, Speedy talked openly about his struggles with mental health. He had a very high ACE score. He lost a sister to a drunk driver as a young child. There was some sexual abuse. We lost an uncle to AIDS during the AIDS epidemic, and he was Speedy's caretaker. He had a lot of ADHD. Sport was really how he was able to function. Later in life, he witnessed a roommate die by suicide. He had 2 suicide attempts in the past. These are all huge risk factors. And for him, when he passed away, the media wrote out headlines that said, dead Olympian in Lambs Canyon due to gunshot wound. Those are all the things that you don't want to put into a headline. All of the younger skiers, and it's an obscure sport, I'm not pretending like it's some highlight sport, but there were a lot of younger skiers who grew up with him as their coach or grew up looking up to him. And following the next Winter Olympics, some of the young men who got to that same high level ended up feeling suicidal themselves. One of them ended up going to Lambs Canyon because he knew from the headline that that's where Speedy went. So he knew that Speedy felt the same way that he was feeling, or he assumed that he did. He could connect with that. And thankfully his parents recognized, and when he said, I'm going to Lambs Canyon, they said, whoa, let's intervene here. So there's a way where if you're talking about it in an unsafe way, it can create contagion, because that fear can become contagious. But if we talk about it in a logistical way, if we have tools, and if we feel like we've got the basic knowledge, and then we have the tools to persuade people that there's hope and help available, that is also contagious. So that was a great question. Thank you. We're going to kind of breeze through the curriculum, but I just want to show you what a sample lesson would be. Here we're walking through. The advisors have some scripts if they want to use that, or they can just take the main points and start guiding a conversation with all these kids that are in the Hope Squad. Some Hope Squads, again, are classes. So in Utah, it became so popular that kids wanted credit for it, and they didn't want to just meet for 9, club meetings. They wanted to be meeting a lot every day. This is, again, not a this is not like a leadership group, so it wouldn't take the place of like student leadership. They're not going to be in charge of announcements, but there is a Hope Week, and so during the Hope Week, perhaps they are getting on the announcements, perhaps they are helping with an assembly, but that's not the main role of a Hope Squad. So it's talking us through, what are we doing? We're being sympathetic. What does sympathetic mean? We want to offer hope. We want to reassure that person that help is available, that suicidal feelings are temporary, that the person knows that his or her life is important to you. And we're talking about everything under the sun, from a very close friend to somebody that you don't know at all. And if we're talking about this now, when we're in high school, middle school, elementary, the upper end of elementary school, these are things that are going to carry with us through life. So these are going to be people who go to college campuses, they enter the military, they're going into the work setting, and they're also becoming the instructors for their family members. If we think about suicide prevention as a river, I should have brought this image, but we think of it as like kind of a stream. There's this upstream piece, and then we're getting closer to some rapids. There's the rapids, and then there's the fall. So we have prevention, we have intervention, and we have postvention. So in Hope Squad, we're teaching all of these pieces. And in life, we have to respond with all of those pieces. And so it really does empower someone for the rest of their life. We want to spend the most of our time focused on that prevention piece. And if we think about it globally, we don't have the opportunity to get curriculum, get training and education in front of every demographic. But if we get training and education into schools, K-12 schools, or even higher education, that can disseminate into families, into homes. And it can reach grandparents, it can reach divorced middle-aged fathers, which become a big demographic when we're looking at suicide rates. Then we've got the don'ts. What do we not want to do? And why don't we want to do this? Have we heard this within our school or within our friends or within our family? And while not every school is impacted by a youth suicide, most schools are impacted by a suicide of a parent, a family member, or someone in the community. And you don't want to wait until that happens to be able to respond. What are we're discussing? We're making sure that we're talking about the basics, and then we're giving the students there in this class or this club the opportunity to practice. We want to make sure we're not training these kids to be counselors. They're learning how to have some really good conversational skills. They're learning how to not keep unsafe secrets, and they know how to refer this information off to a trusted adult. They're really trying to convince their friends to talk to a trusted adult, whoever that might be. And as we're thinking about the nomination process, it's not nominations by staff and parents, it's students. Who are the top 3 people that you go to when you're struggling, when you have, who do you tell your secrets to? And when you do the Hope Squad Advisor program, you can either have them come to you to do the training, or you can go to Utah. And if school's in session, you can do a tour of the various schools. And I remember going to a middle school, and I said, if you guys are convincing everyone to go tell adults, doesn't that make you a narc? Like, isn't that this stigma that you all of a sudden walk away with? And they said, no, like, there's ways to do it. And the kids know that if you can train them, you can empower them, there's ways that they can persuade these people. These are the people that their peers already go to and trust. They might be the sensitive individuals that just end up becoming the problem solvers or the natural leaders. I'm not sure if that program is still out there, but that's who these kids are. They are the natural leaders, and we want to make sure that they aren't having to take on the burden of the friends that are struggling and ending up with like text messages day and night without the support and the skills of what to do. Do's and don'ts. We're wrapping it up. So to go along with that lesson, the Hope Squad squatters would have this year 1, phase 4. They've got a workbook. So those are things that can be printed off if the Hope Squad advisor wants to. It's not necessary. The other supplement is that there's monthly newsletters for families. And so what's been most impressive to me is that as we went into lockdown, Hope Squad came out very quickly with a phase of help at home. So in the elementary program, the introduction it is fundamentals, year 1, year 2 is bullying, and year 3 is resilience. So you can see that some of the basics get looped through, but they're presented in different ways. So if a person were to be nominated and remain in Hope Squad for 3 years, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade elementary, there's a lot that's going on there. Junior high, middle school. So we've got the fundamentals, some essentials, and some connections, the basics of what this curriculum looks like. And if you guys reach out to me with any specifics on samples that you would like, I know that we just went through a high school lesson, but I can show you examples of what an elementary or middle school lesson would look like. And then we've got 4 years of high school content. So we've got the fundamentals, the essentials, connections, and growth. So if someone were to be in Hope Squad for 4 years in high school, they shouldn't be doing the same thing year after year. It should always be different. Then there's some supplemental phases that have been developed that some schools need and other schools don't feel that they need. So these you could sub in. Again, in the content that we were looking at, you can see some of it is starred. Those are the basics. So if you only have a group that's able to meet 4 times, choose those 4 and then build on from it. It is scoped in a way that makes sense, but you have the advisor has the ability to change the scope. Gender and ethnicity, putting out a fire, what do you do when a peer is in crisis? Selfies, how do you take, self-care, understanding trauma, LGBTQ. That's a huge one in the state of Utah, and something that they're just finally able to start talking about mainstream. And then Hope from Home is that one that really caught my eye. Very quickly, they put together a phase so that they can continue those Hope Squads at home. We know that students are struggling at home, and who are they talking to? They're talking to their peers, those natural helpers, the people that they go to help solve their problems. And if a Hope Squad is set up, then they've been trained to help, to figure that out and to set boundaries so that they're not taking on too much. They've also created supplemental programs for veterans and some colleges and some corporations. We're getting kind of close on time, but let's see. I'll go ahead and show this video from the Davis School District.
Ten young people who take their life by suicide will tell a friend, and that friend will never tell an adult. They'll give some sort of clue, some kind of warning sign.
I am Christy Hutchinson. I work in student services and prevention. I'm the prevention specialist there. I work with things like bully prevention, substance abuse, gang prevention, and suicide prevention. The Hope Squads were created by an organization called Hope for Utah down in Provo, and it's a peer-to-peer gatekeeper program. And so students are trained on how to identify students that are struggling with depression or have some of the warning signs for suicide, and then how to talk to them and approach them and be that little light of hope, and then help those individuals seek help. So we're not training them to be counselors or therapists in any form, but we're teaching them how to have the skills to help their friends and their family and even their community.
My name is Emily Matheson. I'm a senior at Clearfield High School this year, and I am the president of the State Hope Squad Student Advisory Board. I think Hope Squads are important in schools because most of the time students who are struggling with suicidal thoughts are not going to want to go to a teacher. They're scared of them. They're intimidated by them. They just don't want to open up to a teacher. So if they're going to open up to anybody, it's going to be one of their friends. And the Hope Squad members are the people that they're most likely to open up to. And we're just there as an extra resource. I've learned that any small action of good can start a chain reaction that spreads through your community and your school, and it's visible. It's totally easy to tell how much Hope Squad is making a difference.
Number one cause of death for Utah, ages 10 to 17. Think about that. 30 years ago, it was diseases. 20 years ago, it was accidents. Now put out by the state health department, number one.
We have heard about students who have been identified, and then because they were identified, people were able to surround them and give them that love and that support and encouragement that people really need when they're feeling that way.
Everybody has a story. Everybody has challenges in life. It may even be you, but I can promise you that you're going to have friends and peers that are going to be struggling. Suicide is so different for every person. We could have, all of you students could have the same experience. Failed a test, romantic breakup, disciplinary action, something that happened in your life, and 100 of you are going to say, that stinks, that was terrible. But one of you may contemplate suicide because of the challenge.
The hardest thing I've had to do is just focus more on the struggles of other people, because it's easy to overlook what people are going through, and just it's hard to remember to not judge people and always be kind to everybody, and it's just made me more aware.
You know, it is tough, and especially when you're a soft-hearted person and you care about people, you can carry it with you. You can tend to feel like that person's feelings is your responsibility. And that's not a bad thing to have that empathy. But what we're going to talk about today, too, is how to not get in the pit with them, how to be reaching the hand down instead of climbing in there with the mud and the muck with them and wallowing together, because really we're the light on the hill. And so by helping students have the tools to say, I love you too much to keep this a secret, we're going to get help together, then you are giving students that empowerment of saying, you know, I love you and I'm going to help you, but your burden is not mine alone.
So, from the words of someone who's implemented it, I've got a couple videos here from students because we're trying to engage students. You know, video making, having a YouTube channel, social media is huge. And so there's lots of videos out there. If you get onto Instagram, if you follow an account or YouTube, it's really quite phenomenal. So I'm going to share one of these videos.
What is a Hope Squad? A Hope Squad is a suicide prevention organization, but mainly throughout the year, we focus on boosting the morale of the school and encouraging everybody to live more fully. You know what, but I have a more important question. How has my Hope Squad influenced my school? Nuestro Hope Squad influenced to Spanish.
Influencia.
Nuestro Hope Squad ha influenciado a nuestra escuela por todas las actividades que hacemos y el esfuerzo que hemos dado en motivar a nuestros estudiantes. Por ejemplo, one time we had something called Hope Week. The entire week we did activities that emphasize hope and happiness throughout our school. In the morning we handed out candies, they're called lifesavers. And then during lunch we had this thing called the Wall of Hope. We had people come by and write happy quotes or something interesting on a sticky note, post it on the glass wall, and as you came by, you could take anything that you needed, or you could just sit and glance at all these hopeful messages. It was awesome. Then we had an assembly.
All right, in the interest of time, I'm gonna pause it. I will send this deck to you guys so you can watch these videos at a later time when there's more time in the day. All right, so with your Hope Squad, when you purchase the curriculum, they really ask for you to because it's going to be changing the culture of your school, they're asking for, to commit to 3 years. You need to have your administration bought into it. You really want to be ready to say, we're going into this. After 3 years, there is a maintenance fee to continue to get the updated curriculum. The curriculum is constantly updated every year. You're going to get a fundraising kit, and mine is in a storage unit in Boise. I didn't bring it with me to Tahoe. There's a fundraising kit because with Hope Squad, there's t-shirts. Oftentimes kids need to be fed. They will come to the meeting when there's cereals put out, or if you're serving lunch. So to get those types of fees, or even to just pay for the curriculum. So there's a whole bunch of questions in here. How does the school get started? What are the requirements? Again, you want the admin approval. You need a mental health agency partnership, and that can be hard in rural communities. But remember, this was designed in rural communities. And so finding an agency that is willing to partner in some capacity, because if we get to that level 3 in our MTSS response or our RTI response, we need to have a partnership in place. We need to be able to have those mental health practitioners in the community come in a postvention response. We want more than that. We would love for them to come in for different events. We want them to be a part of Hope Week. I saw that over in Idaho Falls. They brought in a local practitioner who did a big talk. He did kind of a keynote at an assembly on just this positive piece on mindfulness, and he was hysterical. But that's based on the agency partnership that was created with the school district. This is not a school district's problem. It just so happens that that's one of the institutions that we can use to roll out prevention. And again, we need 2 to 3 advisors per school. I will send, there's lots of slides here with lots of questions answered in full. Current costs and maintenance fees. We're going to look at a breakdown of prices in just a moment. Let's see. Gotcha. Okay. The success since April. I'm going to kind of skip through some of this because I think it'll answer a lot of individual questions. And I can always go into more depth about this. Nominations. It's going to talk through the curriculum. What is the curriculum based on? Contract for the Hope members. There's no contract for squad members. That's something that some schools talk about. Like, do we need some kind of a behavior contract? Is it too much pressure? So there is a lot of data that's being taken, a lot of evaluation pieces, and that is all available. It's being studied, and so part of the fees go back to pay for that research component. There are cohorts of this program in Ohio and in Texas and Utah, obviously. Idaho Falls was one where the Bonneville School District, they adopted the curriculum across the high schools, middle schools, elementary schools. Henderson, Nevada came in last year and they have adopted it at their high schools and middle schools. And again, it's coming from the town. It's not necessarily coming just from the school district. Everyone's bought into it. So confidentiality, these are big things for a school, whether we're talking about suicide or anything else. Are kids getting bullied? Sometimes, yes, but let's talk about that because we can get through it and we can change the culture of the school. And these are the kids who have the strength to get through it. We can teach them how to handle it and we can change the culture of what's going on. Fundraising ideas. There is an example of what the kit comes with. So there's a lot of different ideas on what kids can do to fundraise. We need to start thinking about mental health the way that we're thinking about sports, athletics. Is there a parent who would typically be a booster parent for the athletics that could become a booster parent for, mental health and prevention? Could the program be held liable? We want to check with state legislation, but in almost every state, there is Good Samaritan legislation. What happens if there is a student who takes their life? This has happened. I met with a school who had a suicide. They set up Hope Squads. Hope Squads became so popular in this very large, very rural, very urban, not very urban, I'm sorry, very affluent school in Provo, that they created a before school club, as well as, I think it was 2 classes. There was just so many kids that were interested. There were so many kids that were being nominated. Everybody wanted to help be involved, but they did lose someone to suicide after being in place for about 3 3 years. And no one is to blame. It's inevitable that somebody might die by suicide, no matter how much we do to prevent it. But they did have postvention in place, and they were able to reach out and connect and talk about, what do we do to help support other people? What do we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? How do we remember somebody and talk about them safely and still provide hope, so that if anyone else is feeling in that same place, we know how to help provide support to them. All right, lots of questions. Are elementary students too young? Here we go. There is a book that Greg has written if you're looking for that type of information. News articles, there's published articles from Jennifer Wright Berryman. There's a little TED Talk here that you can watch later. PBS in Utah created a documentary called Hope Lives. It's got a vignette of 3 different young people who experience suicide in a different way. And it goes into some of the research being done at the University of Utah, as well as Hope Squad program. Here is the breakdown of the costs. So it is not an inexpensive program. It's not the most expensive program. If we compare it again to athletics, you know, it's an investment in the future. For each person that is lost to suicide, that's over $1 million worth of lifetime earnings. For a parent who has lost a child to suicide, this is nothing. If cost is an issue, let's not balk. We're looking for a program that fits the need of your school or your community. And if this happens to be that program, I'm sure that we can find a way to cover the costs. The state of Utah supplements $1,000 per middle school, high school for prevention programming. State of Idaho has been a cluster, and I'm happy to talk about that with you individually. And there's a lot of flexibility and ingenuity that we can use in California and Nevada to create, or if you're watching this from outside of those 3 states, we can always talk about what's available in your area. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I will send you a copy of this deck. I'm going to send you that video that David Covington did. It wasn't the Nevada video. It was one that he did in Phoenix at a different conference, but it's the same content. And it's interesting because he's comparing suicide to Ebola. So interesting times. Jeff jumped off. Great. Anybody have any other questions? Otherwise, I really appreciate your time today and jumping on for some coffee and talking about Hope Squad. Okay, well, I'll hang on here for a couple more minutes. When you sign off, I think that there will be a link for just a quick evaluation of today's, it's not a training, today's presentation. And that's all I've got for you guys. I hope you found it beneficial. Oh, we do have 2 minutes left. Wow, I didn't have a clock in front of me. All right, we're going to end early. Everybody take care. Have a great day.